Welcome to the show. I'm Kim Parley. Great to have you with us tonight. President Trump made his first address to Congress last night, and many market watchers were particularly interested in what he had to say about reforming the U.S. tax system. Trump said that his economic team is working on historic tax reform, but did not shine much light on the details. So just what should we expect to see in terms of a tax reform package? Joining me to explain everything is James Marple. He's a senior economist at TD Bank Group, but it's great to have you here. I'm not going to make you explain everything, but you guys have a pretty meaty report you just put out titled Answering the Big Questions on U.S. Tax Reform. My great bedtime reading that I've had. So I want to just go through, if I could, the questions that you actually put out there. And so let's just start at the beginning. What are the key changes that are being talked about?
Sure. Well, the Republicans have talked a long time about tax reform. They've wanted to do it. Paul Ryan, I think years ago, since he's been, even before he was the Speaker, was putting forward blueprints. And really, their tax reform wanted to simplify the tax code, so lower the number of tax brackets, lower the rate. And on the corporate tax side, actually, there's been a pretty bipartisan push to lower the corporate income tax rate, just given that the U.S. Has a much higher rate than most other countries. So simplify, address both the personal and corporate side, and make the rates competitive. So that's kind of the basis of it. But on the personal side, the plan reduces the number of tax brackets from 7, from 10 all the way up close to 40 to just 3 at 12, 25, and 33%.
And I'm just going to pause you for a second because I want to bring up the chart we have here because you've broken this all down just to show it, but keep on going. So 3 tax brackets.
Yeah, so 3 tax brackets, and then lowering the tax rates on investment income, on capital gains to half the rate of sort of the regular the wage income. And then, of course, on the other side, the corporate tax reform, lowering the rate and changing the structure of the corporate tax.
Before we've got here up on the screen the personal income tax changes with regards to interest and investment. I mean, is there some, we'll get this, I mean, does this benefit some more than others?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you get more of your income from interest, I mean, you're going to see a major tax cut. Interest income was taxed as ordinary income. So, actually, if you were at the top rate, the marginal rate, 39.6, you're going to see that go down all the way to 16.5%. So that's a big cut in that rate. So similarly, the capital gains, we'll see the tax rate lowered. We'll see the rates were before were 20, it'll go down to 16.5 at the top end. So yeah, I mean, if your primary income is coming from investment, you're going to see some lower taxes.
Let's bring up the next one, the corporate income tax changes. We've talked a bit about this in the past. I mean, when he won, essentially, we saw the markets rocket up based on, I think, a lot of this. But the big one here is just that whether it's the House GOP or the Trump proposal, corporate rates are going down.
Yeah, I think that's likely. And in fact, that was even maybe going to happen regardless of who won.
Because of the bipartisan piece.
Right. But I mean, I think the fact that now you have a Republican president who will sign the bills that is brought forward by Republican Congress, I think, tax reform on the corporate side, where there is even some bipartisan agreement, is much more likely. So, I mean, the big thing there is there was some difference between what Trump wanted to do and what the GOP wanted to do. Trump had campaigned on lowering the rate to 15%, the GOP on a 20% rate. But the GOP plan goes a lot further than that. It really changes the way corporate income is taxed. It's no longer really an income tax. You can no longer sort of depreciate your investments the way, but you'll be able to write them off completely. At the same time, you won't pay taxes on exports, and any imports will have to pay a border adjustment. So that's.
Let's get into that a little bit, shall we? I think that's, the destination-based cash flow tax. Just, again, for the book, if we can write a destination-based cash flow for dummies. I want you to tell me just what it is and why it matters.
Yeah, well, it's too many letters for one. Acronyms are supposed to only be 3 letters. But no, so, I mean, that's right. So there's two parts of it, the destination-based part and then the cash flow part. The cash flow part, simply, the big change is that any corporate investment will be able to be written off completely in the year it's purchased. So that lowers the rate on any kind of new investment, and that's the part that will probably be the most stimulative to economic growth, especially over the long term by raising investment. At the same time, you won't be able to expense interest anymore that you spend on any investment. So there is a little bit of a trade-off, but seemingly the fact that you can write off totally any major investments, we should see investment increase. Then the other side of it is, of course, the destination base. That's trying to move the tax more towards a consumption consumption tax, so you'll only pay
quietly.
Quietly. So, but basically, border adjustments are part of any value-added tax, and this is essentially a value-added tax, with the exception that unlike in a VAT, you can deduct wages and salaries from your tax base. So, other than that, it's very similar. But because of that adjustment, the fact that right now you don't pay any tax on imports, so you can deduct that. Now that will be taxed at 20%, and you'll get the credit. That is going to be a pretty big adjustment from the current system.
All right, stay with us when we come back. Speaking of adjustments, we're going to ask the question, who wins and who loses from these tax changes, and what does it mean for us? That's going to be with James Marple. He's Senior Economist at TD Bank Group, answering that question right after this. We're back with James Marple, Senior Economist at TD Bank Group. He just outlined some of the proposed changes that could be coming through, either through the Trump tax plan or the House Congress GOP tax plan. It's what's been powering the markets. We're going to get some very clear questions here. Let's start with who wins and loses. Who wins and loses from the corporate tax plan changes?
So there, the border adjustment, I think, is quite important, because if you are an importer, and we looked at sort of what the U.S. imports a lot of, it imports a lot of clothing, imports a lot of energy, those kind of things are going to see much higher, potentially, rates of tax, up to 20%. On the other hand, if you're an exporter of, things like aerospace, you could actually even need to get you'd see a negative tax rate. You might even need to see a refund or a credit applied, because you just export and you're not taxed on your exports, and you can deduct all your domestic costs. So that's kind of how it plays out. Depends on, do you import a lot, or are you an exporter? Of course, every business should benefit from the drop in the rate, from close to 40% down to 20%. But really, I think that border adjustment is really going to choose the winners and the losers. On the personal side, everyone gets a bit of a tax cut.
But some more than others.
But some more than others. And if you are in the, I think it increases sort of as you go up the income scale. And if you're in the 0.1%, which is income, I think, a bit over $3 million, you're going to see about a 30% cut in your taxes.
Which is staggering. I have to say, that is a massive number, but continue.
Yeah, so you'll $1 million less. But that's the drop down in the rate from 40% down to 33% on top of some of the other changes. Yeah, so it is, it's not going to be equally shared. It will definitely benefit as you make more money, you'll save more.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a bit about something that I know that you look at a lot of. Just two questions, I think, but how much it costs and really does this help, in terms of the economy? Let's start with just the cost.
Yeah. Well, how much will it cost actually depends partly on will it help and will it raise economic growth. So the best analysis of this are sort of two institutes or that look at it, the Tax Foundation and the Tax Policy Center, and they've looked at the Trump plan and said the Trump plan is probably going to cost something like $5 to $6 trillion on a static basis due to the loss in revenue. So that's probably a non-starter, a better, they're not going to ever come up with a plan that would pass Congress that's going to cost that much money. But the House plan costs a bit less, kind of $2 to $3 trillion, so maybe half what the Trump plan does on a static basis. Then if you sort of allow for greater investment to grow the economy at a faster rate, perhaps it costs much less than that.
And we heard President Trump talk about that, whether growth rates went up to 3 or higher.
Yeah, and we sort of note in the note that above 3% growth is going to be hard to achieve just because of the demographic challenges. But certainly there is the potential to raise productivity, which has been pretty low in the U.S., and raise levels of investment. So I think there is some truth to the fact that if you make the tax code more efficient and you reduce some of the distortions, you move taxing investment to taxing consumption a little more, you should see a little bit economic growth. But in any case, it's probably not going to pay for itself, even with that faster economic growth, and they will have to find either offsets elsewhere or to achieve revenue neutrality, they'll have to water down the plan a little bit.
There's one other chart here I wouldn't mind bringing up if we could, which shows the tax cuts that could come in terms of how they compare to some of the Canadian provinces in terms of the tax rates being paid there. So let's bring that one up. I mean, what I think, what we see here is that Canada becomes less competitive.
Yeah, certainly on
bottom line.
Certainly, and this is just looking on the personal income side, but even on the corporate income tax side, where there has been a move to lower corporate income taxes in Canada, that if you suddenly now, I mean, this will lower the tax rate on investment in the United States a lot and really make America much more competitive as a source, as a place to invest. And that has to be a bit of a concern for Canada, perhaps maybe even a constraint on some of the things the Canadian government wants to do as it considers its budget.
Fascinating work. We appreciate the research. I know you're doing a lot of different scenarios, trying to figure out what's happening. We'll have you back when we find out a little more.
Okay, thank you very much.
James Marple, he is a senior economist at TD Bank Group, and he joined me here in studio.